Hello everybody and welcome back to the HLTCO YouTube channel. The subject of today's video, perhaps surprisingly to some of you, is Blackburn Rovers. Now, I often think to myself that there are a number of clubs across the EFL that are underrepresented in terms of YouTube content or the general level of discussion that they get, because it seems to be, particularly in the mainstream sports media bubble, that you will focus on the Premier League primarily and, the bigger clubs within that 20-team division. But I think similar to the Sunderland video that I recorded at the start of this week, Blackburn Rovers are a very, very interesting project, and I sort of hate that word, to be quite honest with you, but it feels as though it's the best way of describing them at the moment, because alongside Sunderland, they are leading the charge really in the second tier when it comes to youth development and putting your faith in a large number of young players to actually get the job done. The main reason, I suppose, for me having my eyebrows raised by Blackburn Rovers in the first place this season was the 8-0 victory they managed to secure at Harrogate in the League Cup a couple of weeks back. It was their biggest ever away victory, I believe. 7 different scorers and a very, very young age profile across that entire side. And of the 16 players used, 12 of them actually came through the Blackburn Rovers Academy, which I'm sure you'll agree is quite ridiculous when you consider how littered the game is now with players from all over the place, that you've got such a homegrown core that are not only playing for Blackburn Rovers but playing in such impressive fashion, scoring 8 goals, albeit against lower league opposition, but doing so with a real flourish. And I'm sure from Blackburn Rovers fans' perspective, there's a great deal to be very happy with at the moment. Just to give you a bit of context over the last 12 to 18 months relating to Blackburn, in the summer of 2022, Tony Mowbray, who of course is now in charge of the Black Cats up at the Stadium of Light, that video that I covered on Monday, he departed and John Dale Thomason came in to the Blackburn Rovers hot seat. And I said it in relation to the Sunderland project, I'm not sure any Black Cats fans would have expected Tony Mowbray to really take that club on and get results in the speed that he has. And similarly with John Dale Thomason, I'm sure there were many Rovers fans that hoped he would, but it's such a competitive dog-eat-dog division that you can't ever really have a guarantee of success when you are bringing a new manager into the club. And with such a young core, I think there is even more of a dice roll from the hierarchy behind the scenes at Ewood Park when it comes to putting someone like John Dale Thomason in charge. But to just run through the squad that was used against Harrogate, of course, in the 8-0 victory, I mentioned that there were 12 players that came through the club's academy, and the age profile of these guys is quite remarkable. You had Scott Walton playing at the heart of the back four at 25, Dom Hyam at 27, Patrick Gamble at 19, John Buckley at 23, Jake Garrett at 20, Dylan Marconde at 22, Hayden Carter 23, Zach Gilsonen at 20, Tom Bloxham 18, James Edmondson 17, and Tom Aitchison just 16 years old. The likes of Lewis Travis, Adam Walton and Joe Rankin Costello, they weren't even involved against Harrogate. So there is a quite remarkable amount of young players that are not only part of this Blackburn Rovers first team, but who have come through that academy setup. And I'm not suggesting it's the be-all and end-all and the only way that you can ever really look to win promotion, but I certainly feel as though in both Sunderland and Blackburn, you have very, very interesting projects here with a Category 1 academy and with a real desire from every level of the football club to really push that project on. You look at Blackburn, of course they've previously won a Premier League title when Jack Walker was in charge, Alan Shearer, you've got the Tim Sherwood era, you've got that entire sepia-tinted memory if you're a Blackburn Rovers fan. And admittedly, they have fallen away from, I suppose, the spotlight in recent years with the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, etc. dominating. But in both Blackburn and Sunderland, you've got clubs with big fan bases that have illustrious histories that have, in Sunderland's case, of course, I covered it on Monday in that video, the documentary made them sort of a punchline for many people. And whilst Blackburn haven't had that degree of ignominy, they have had, hard times relatively compared to what they could have expected back in the mid-90s. So to see them going down this new route with their academy such a focal point of it, it really, really is quite interesting to me, and I'm sure to you as well. When you couple that squad that I've just mentioned against Harrogate with the summer business they've actually conducted as well, it becomes even more impressive, because just like Sunderland, it really feels as though Blackburn are going full steam ahead with this youth-led revolution. Because let me just reel off the names for you now, players that have come into Ewood Park across the summer just gone. gone. You've got Andy Moran, 19 years old, coming in on loan from Brighton. James Hill at 21, coming in on loan from Bournemouth. Arnor Sigurdsson, 24, on loan from CSKA Moscow. Semir Telalovic, 23, from Borussia Mönchengladbach. Niall Ennis, 24, from Plymouth. And Leopold Wallstedt, 24, in goal from Odd in Norway. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that they can guarantee that all of those players will be smash hits as part of the Blackburn first team. Of course, there are going to be some that do better than others, but quite clearly, when you look at the age profile, it is a model that they are going down. And with that in mind, you know, you could say, well, you know, where's the money coming from? But they've actually made a profit of around €4 million after all of those purchases because of the business they've done. They've seen Thomas Kaminski, a 30-year-old goalkeeper, go out to Luton, and Ashley Phillips, a 6'4", 18-year-old centre-back who had been on the books at Blackburn Rovers from the age of just 12, moved to Spurs for around £2.5 million. Now, you could argue that somebody from the Blackburn Rovers Academy that has generated so much interest to the point where Spurs have taken the plunge on him, losing him for just £2.5 million might seem like a mere drop in the ocean, and maybe in the fullness of time we will look back on that as a genuine steal for Ange Postecoglou and the men from North London. But at the same time, you know, this has to be the model that clubs like Blackburn and Sunderland go down, potentially getting far higher fees across the next 12 to 18 months for some other academy graduates. And it's worth saying, you know, he had just 8 appearances in the Blackburn first team when Spurs snapped him up, just 449 minutes of football in the Championship for Rovers last season. So it's a very small section of what he is capable of, and obviously at that particular point Blackburn felt it was the correct thing to do, to take the money, move him on. And I'm not sure at this point, you know, categorically, but I would imagine there is some form of sell-on clause or fee in there for any future success he has as part of the Spurs first team. I think, you know, this is where the interesting dynamic comes in, and it's very similar to the Sunderland project. I appreciate I've created 2 videos in the space of 3 days that do follow a similar pattern, but it's sort of followed on from one another really. And I just want to make a point as well quickly in the middle of this video that I don't expect any of this information to be new to Blackburn Rovers fans. It's not as though I'm coming to you as people who live and breathe that football club and thinking I'm presenting new information. This is more an explainer for a neutral that maybe hasn't seen what Blackburn are doing and the direction they're heading in, and they want to have a better understanding of exactly what we can expect from Rovers across the next 12 to 24 months. But if you look at the Championship in general, I think it's very key to point out at this stage that there is a little bit less pressure on these young players, but at the same time it's a fantastic proving ground. You know, you've got big crowds, vociferous, you know, spectators, you've got a real competitiveness. You can't really guarantee any side is going to have success in that 24 team division before a ball is kicked in the campaign, and we have seen that with the likes of Ipswich coming up from League One and making a splash immediately in the second tier with Kieran McKenna in charge. We've even seen Plymouth perform well, another recently promoted side from League One. So you can't guarantee that any team is going to have success, but when you see youth development being such a key part of 2 clubs in Sunderland and in Blackburn's case, then it really is quite an interesting dynamic to explore. And, you know, potentially you've got a player, for example, in Adam Walton, who was really kicked on in the minds of neutrals and partisans alike over the last 6 to 12 months. And there were plenty of clubs in the Premier League linked with potentially a late move for him in the summer window. It didn't materialise, but I would imagine that you will see, you know, a player like Adam Walton potentially going for £20 million if Blackburn don't get promoted at the back end of this season. And it might sound defeatist, it might sound as though Blackburn Rovers fans would be disappointed to see one of the crown jewels from their side leave, albeit for a high transfer fee, but that has to be the model, because if you back your recruitment staff to really go back into the market and make sure that you reinvest that money well in young players with high ceilings on long contracts, then it can be the perfect stepping stone. And I see this myself, you know, as a Palace fan, we've brought in players like Mark Day, Michael Olise, Abire Eze, Chet Decore. We are well aware at Crystal Palace that whilst we are a Premier League, South London based club, we are still a stepping stone for these players to get to the truly elite level. But if you can continue to chip away at a project like that for 4 or 5 years, and continue to get consistent profits for these players that you bring in, albeit in a different stratosphere completely in terms of their fees, but for low amounts and sell for high, then it has to be a model that everyone can get on board with. And as I said, in relation to Sunderland on Monday, we've seen Brentford and Brighton, both Premier League clubs now of course, really use that model to their best efforts really across the last few years, and they've reaped the rewards for it across the last 12 to 24 months. So I just wanted really to shine a light on Blackburn for you today. At the back end of last season, they obviously missed out on the playoffs I think they finished 7th after a dramatic last day performance away at Millwall. But there is nothing really to suggest that they can't go one better this year, because it's a learning process for these young players. You know, when you've got such a young core, there are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be days when it doesn't quite click into place. But from a fan base's point of view, I'm sure I speak for most Blackburn fans here when I say you would far rather see a team full of young players from your academy that have genuine pride in wearing that shirt, putting it all out there every single week, and potentially falling a little bit short of, say, the playoff places or automatic promotion, but making consistent progress in terms of their games, their general value, and the way that Blackburn Rovers are viewed as a football club across the entire English pyramid. I'm certainly interested by them. Alongside Sunderland, they are going to be a club that I'm going to follow very, very closely this season. Hopefully, now that you've watched this, you feel similar to me, and you will be keeping a close eye on Blackburn across the rest of this season alongside their supporters. If you have enjoyed this video today, please do consider giving it a like or pushing the subscribe button, because it does genuinely make a massive difference to me being able to push the page up the algorithm and grow it as organically and quickly as possible. If you are interested in a 24-hourly roundup of everything going on in the world of football Monday to Friday, I also record a podcast over on Patreon that is £3 a month, delivered straight to your inbox by 8:30 every weekday morning. Other than that, hope you're having a lovely day, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.